everyone, this is Janat Kamal and you're watching Hindustan. As Hindustan goes through its election period, millions of voters come to the ballot to cast their important votes. In the midst of this significant period in Hindustan, the plight of the farmers cannot be overlooked. With millions of farmers now having an opportunity to take out their displeasure with the policies of BJP at the ballot, will there be a better hope for Hindustan's farmers at these elections? To discuss about the situation of the Hindustani farmers and the elections taking place, we have with us Anoop Ratnaker, who is the founder of Relife, an organization that brings dignity and prosperity to small farmer community. Thank you so much, Anoop, for joining us. Anoop, what are the most basic difficulties farmers of Hindustan are facing, and what measures has been taken by the government for solving these problems?
Janat, thanks for having me. When we talk about farm crisis in India, but I think also increasingly globally, it is one of actually the viability of the occupation itself. That's come into serious question in the recent decades. Some of the key factors, if you look at it from a simple, profit and loss perspective, it's the rising input costs. Seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, labor, everything has been on the rise. It's on top of declining soil fertility, and water itself is becoming quite a crisis. Then we have a very unusual trend where some of these prices are increasing. The food prices have either been stable or in fact declining. If you look at it from a pure economic standpoint, we're pushing the farmers to produce more and more, but that's what's causing the glut in the market. Just last year in the state of Madhya Pradesh, for example, the trigger for a big unrest was that they had a bumper crop. And that led to a 30 to 50% drop in prices in cash crops like onion, peas, potatoes, etc. So it's a combination of all of these factors. And also, when you think about it from a small farmer perspective, it's the age old issue of access to finance. Even today, a lot of them rely on very high interest rates kind of money lending kind of operations for their cash flows. So I'm saying it's a combination of all of these factors that's causing the larger agricultural crisis. And in terms of the government's intervention, if you think about it from a farm viability standpoint, there's a lot of things that the government can do from a policy standpoint, but I think the movement there has been relatively slow. Some of the shining examples that I can kind of quote, though, from the recent past has been the direct cash benefit experiment. In one of the states, the home state of Telangana, the government actually provided 8,000 rupees, that's 4,000 rupees per acre per season to farmers as a support for their investment into the farming side. That's what they're calling it. And that's benefited about 7 million farmers. And it seems like it's worked very well, at least from an election standpoint. They've come back, but that not might be the only parameter for for the success. But certainly, it's helped them in terms of offsetting some of the costs that they might have upfront. This is something that the central government also has taken up, given the success in Telangana, and announced a larger program. Apart from that, a lot of other initiatives have been kind of experimented with, where farm insurance has been kind of relooked at. And now, increasingly, a trend that we are seeing is that the government is actually actively supporting farmers to move into what is called zero budget natural farming, or traditional farming methods. And this is a big departure from how the government had given the big push on the green revolution globally. So in India, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, with Chandrababu Naidu is the chief minister, is the first state to actually adopt it as a statewide policy. So going back in time to some of our traditional practices, etc., is something that's being looked at. The direct impact, of course, of something like that is for a seed manufacturer like Monsanto, who's been selling the BT cotton seeds very successfully
Okay, so
for the
Anoop,
last couple of decades.
like talking about the elections of 2009, the rural voter turnout was 59% as compared to the urban 52%. Later in 2014 elections, the rural voters turnout increased to 67%, whereas the urban vote increased to 61%. So, with the current elections of Hindustan taking place, how do you see Hindustan selecting as their new prime minister?
Well, we are a parliamentary democracy, so we directly vote for our local representatives, and they in turn vote for our prime minister. So I think this larger trend of a US style voting being a referendum for the prime ministerial candidate is something that I'm slightly skeptical about. But if you look at it, respond to your question, rural voters have always voted in larger numbers, and looks like from the current trends as well that they will far outstrip the urban voters. And even amongst them, the women uh, are much higher voters amongst the rural folks as well. So they will have a significant impact on the next party coming in, and also eventually on the prime ministerial candidate. A lot of this, if you look at the women voters' perspective, today they are bearing the burden of most of the household chores in rural India, and also the farm chores. 60 to 70% of the farm labor is today women. So if promises have not been met from last term, then certainly I think they will take a very practical stand in how they're going to cast their vote this time.
Okay, so Anoop, will take a short break here and then continue our discussion. Let's take a short break. So, Anoop, will the unsatisfied rural population of Hindustan prevent the BJP from another term at office?
Certainly, from the signs of the recent state elections in some of the strongholds of BJP, that's Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, and MP, where Congress is overtaking the BJP, it certainly looks like there is a wave uh, towards preventing, another term of the BJP, just on the back of perhaps missed promises, the demonetization affecting the rural folk especially badly.
So, Anoop, do you think the farmers will refrain from voting?
No, certainly not. I mean, I think they are going to make their votes counted. If you look at the biggest political movements and mass rallies that have happened in India, they have been organized by farmers. If the democracy is being kept alive uh, in India, a lot of that credit would go to the farmers in India, who showed up in huge numbers both in Bombay and Delhi last year. So I don't see that trend going down in any respect.
Anoop, BJP and Congress both have put forward their election campaign on the basis of securing benefits for the farmers of Hindustan, promising raised living standards for the rural poor, double farmers' income, right of farmer loans, and power bills. These initiatives are quite satisfactory to real in Hindustani farmers. How successful do you think the political parties of Hindustan will be in the luring of the rural population?
I think rural has always been a very key part of any election. The way the rural folks vote. The farmers this time, I think, are going to be far wiser in their choice, because if you look at the big demands that have been made by the farming community, Janat, they haven't been around continuing to, continue the subsidies, power subsidies, seed subsidies, etc., or even asking for loan waivers, because those are short-term measures in their view. What they're really looking for is long-term concrete measures in terms of support prices of commodities, etc., be, allowing them to run a profitable venture, which basically means their cost plus about 50% on margin. And that's not happened. Those promises haven't been kept. So they're going to be voting for anybody who's going to make farming a more viable operation in the long term.
So currently, based on the situation at hand, do you think Congress has more confidence from the rural population of Hindustan?
Looking at the trends of the recent election and the results of the assembly, I would say yes.
Okay. In 2017, the government stopped releasing the crime-related statistics, but farmers' suicides reported in 2015 were 321. So, what do you think that the current rate of farmer suicide is? Why has the government not taking has hidden these statistics?
Uh, Janat, I'm not in a position to answer why the government might have, uh, taken certain stands, but we know in general, uh, reportage and rights-based organizations looking for facts, etc. We've come under a lot of pressure, and access to information has been an issue. So very difficult to speculate on what the current numbers might be in terms of the farm suicides. Just given the trends of the number of farmers who showed up, 40,000 farmers marching from Nasik to Bombay, demanding, and this is in the nation's most prosperous state, Maharashtra. So you can imagine the plight of farmers in the rest of the country. So I would say that certainly there is suffering there, and the numbers don't reflect the real tragedy that's there in this sector right now.
Okay, Anoop, we'll take a short break here and then we'll continue our discussion from here. Okay, so Anoop, how has your firm Relife helped the rural community of Hindustan, and what are its most successful initiatives?
Well, as I was saying, Janat, we've just begun Relife as an initiative to kind of address the crisis in a way that leverages technology, but also takes into account the market realities and creating and actually helping farming become more viable. But I'll just step back into why we started this initiative. Uh, we have been a part of Nandi Water, where we provided water to over 600,000 people around the country in 6 states, where we made um, a rural enterprise at the village level actually viable. And we did that with a promise that said we're going to provide clean drinking water 365 days at a small price for the service. And what we actually found is that the farmers and the rural folk, compared to the popular wisdom that's out there, they are actually happy to pay, and they're actually happy to be customers. And what happened as a part of our process is that for the first time, they got to be a demanding customer. They demanded from us that this is your promise and this is what you need to make good. And in turn, we will keep our promise of paying you. So I think that kind of shift we saw. But what also we encountered, and I personally encountered in many, many villages, was declining water levels. We've lost about 60 to 70% of our water resources in the last 10 to 15 years. I'm talking about groundwater. And this crisis is really serious because 90% of our water is utilized by the agriculture sector. So it has a huge ramification. And that's why we began this initiative to see how we can actually better monitor our water resources, take better decisions in our farming cycles, and see how we can eventually make this a more virtuous and a prosperous cycle for our farmers.
So, Anoop, in the end, would you like to give any message to the voters of Hindustan?
I think there's far greater wisdom, Janat, in the common voter than I can vouch for myself. So I'm sure they will take the right calls. But I would say, invest in looking at who the local representatives are, what they stand for. Is there a values match? Look at the promises made by the prior government and the regime, and see if they've actually held up to those promises, and take a call. So I think an informed decision is what I would shoot for always.
Thank you so much, Anoop, for joining us. This was today's Hindustan. Till the next episode, goodbye.